Now, our final guest, John Phillips, is regarded as one of the youngest. He looks like a teenager, right? Look at him. Just out of juvenile court or somewhere. And John Phillips is with KABC Talk Radio. He has his own show, the Midday Show, from 12 noon until 3 every day with a co-host, Jillian Barberi. They're a terrific team together. I congratulate KABC for pairing these two people because they seem to be enjoying themselves very much on radio, and they impart that freshness to the general audience. John Phillips actually was a high school teacher at one time in Hesperia, California, and he was doing well as a high school teacher. In fact, he used to brag to his friends everywhere that nobody in my classroom ever got raped or shot. Not in my classroom. So he had a certain decorum. You're a credit to the community, John. And John worked his way with certain radio stations in LA, eventually got to KABC Radio, where he was the executive producer of a terrific morning show called McIntyre in the Morning. And it still has top ratings, McIntyre in the Morning. And then KABC used John as a utility man. I hope you don't mind that expression. He filled in for almost everybody on KABC. Then they gave him an hour here or an hour there. And then they finally, a couple of weeks ago, they teamed him up with Jillian for the Midday Show. And it's doing very, very well. Try to tune in while you're driving or doing something on your computer or whatever. From 12 noon to 3 o'clock, you'll really enjoy the show. It's a very unpredictable show. I caught some of the show today. I don't know if they even know what they're going to do next. I don't know how they plan their show, how they work with their producer. Perhaps John Phillips will tell us how to get on his show as an author, or if you have a guest in an allied field of writing. And then perhaps, if you don't mind, John, you can tell us about McIntyre in the Morning. And then they have a new man in the morning, Brian Suits, S-U-I-T-S. Brian Suits does a terrific job for 3 hours. And then John comes on with Jillian. And then they got Larry Elder. And they've got other people who are terrific on the station. How do we approach, as a publicist and as an author, how do you approach the individuals on KABC? I've got to say this, that we're very fortunate to be living and working in Southern California because we have several good talk stations here in town, like KFI Radio, KABC Radio, KRLA, and even KFWB is coming back with a lot of interviews. And I think each and every one of us should pay attention to the weekend hosts. They may be more apt to use our authors on weekends for some reason. Maybe during the week things are tight. So I'd like, oh, by the way, John Phillips is regarded as one of the youngest on-the-air talk show hosts in a major market. Really, when you think of the major markets like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Atlanta, major markets, John is building a great reputation, and he's a pretty funny guy, and he knows how to stay fresh. So now, the freshest guy in town, John Phillips.
You have to pull this out because I'm a giant. Whoops. I don't need the microphone, do I?
No, yes, you do.
No.
You pulled it out.
You can do it.
I think I broke it.
No, so it can pull.
Connection right, that's him up.
We now pause for station identification. I don't know. Can you fix it?
There we go. All right, there we go. Thank you very much.
Mike Carruthers.
All right.
Well, after working in radio for, gosh, I think it's now over a decade. I started at KNX in 2000. I'm very happy to be here at the Sportsman's Lodge for something other than for a memorial service. It's very fortunate. I had too many of those here. One of my dearest friends on the planet is a guy by the name of Mike Walker, who's the gossip editor of the National Enquirer, who I have on the show. Great guy. Formerly lived here in Los Angeles. Another close friend, by the way, Don Barrett. Give it up for him. LARadio.com. If you don't read the website every day, you should. But one of the things that Mike Walker always says is the most common question that he's asked as the gossip editor of the National Enquirer is Tom Cruise gay? Everyone asks him every time they have an opportunity to ask him a question. And as a radio talk show host in Los Angeles, the most common question I get asked is, how do I become a talk show host? That was until I got the show with Jillian. Now the most common question is, what does it feel like to be Jillian Barbery's bitch? And I always answer, any comparison to Steve Edwards is fine by me. Love Steve Edwards. But the answer is, it's different for every person. You don't go to Cal State Fullerton and say, I want to major in being a radio talk show host. That's not what you do. Everybody has a different path. Everybody comes at it from a different way. There's only one person that has my way of doing it. That's me. Other people have different ways of doing it. And whatever works for you and gets you in the business is what works for you and gets you in the business. And the honest truth is, to get booked as a guest on the radio is very similar to being a host. Every person has a different path. Every person has a different way of getting there. And just because something works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. And when people ask me, did you go to school to study broadcasting? Did you go to school to study communications? Is that what you studied at Cal State Fullerton? The answer is no. I never studied broadcasting one day in my life. That's the honest truth. I worked at KNX as a writer when I was an undergraduate in college. I wrote the news for Frank Motek and Gail Eichenthal. I woke up at 1:45 in the morning when I lived in Orange County and drove all the way to Los Angeles when all of my friends were out doing things that resulted in them blowing a .2. That's what I did. That's how I learned the business. That's how I got in the business. That worked for me. Other people did it different ways. Larry Elder, my colleague at KABC, started out as a guest on the Dennis Prager Show. That's how it started. Doug McIntyre actually sent in a tape to the station. And a program director was bored one day and listened to it and decided this guy belongs on the air. And suddenly Doug McIntyre was filling in on 710 KMPC when that was a talk station. And it switched to the Zone, and Doug McIntyre worked there. So it's different for different people. But because I didn't study broadcasting or I didn't study communications, that doesn't mean I didn't go to college. I did go to Cal State Fullerton, and I studied political science, which I think is far more important. Political science is about who gets what, when, where, why, and how. It's about power. And if you want to get on the radio, either as a host or a guest, you have to understand power. Because to me, all relationships are transactional to some degree or another. It's people with power, making deals with other people with power, and you horse trade. That's how it works. And by the way, if you're looking for a TV show that shows you exactly how this works, try The House of Cards on Netflix. It's wonderful. And it'll explain everything you need to know. And the fact of the matter is, this is something many of you may not want to hear, but I believe it's the truth. It doesn't mean you're not going to get on, and it doesn't mean that you don't have ability to have an audience to sell your book. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're looking at broadcasters in major markets, in medium markets, and even in small markets, you have no power. None. They have all the power. And you need something from them. You need to be able to get on their shows to sell your books and push your message and build your brand. But when you have no power, that's difficult to do. But there are still ways it can be done. I started out in Los Angeles radio. That's very difficult to do, but I found a way to do it, and it worked for me. So when you're trying to figure out how to get these people who have power to give you something when you have no power, it's a tough putt. It's a tricky proposition. So for that, you have to stop asking yourself the question, what can they do to promote my book or sell my book? Because they don't care about that. They don't care if you sell 1 million books. They don't care if you sell 10 books. That makes no difference to them. They're interested in a couple of different things. They're interested in making sure their radio company stays in business so their paychecks cash, which sometimes that doesn't happen. Talk to people who work for Mark Masters. Sometimes the checks bounce all the way from here to Riverside County. That's just how it works. Sometimes they're interested in pleasing their general managers and their program directors. Those are people who decide whether or not they stay employed at that particular radio station if they're a producer. They certainly have to work on pleasing their host. They don't have to please you. They don't even necessarily want to please you. So to get on their radar, when you have no power, you have to improvise. How does that happen? You have to fix one of their problems, because that's the only power you have. They're not going to do you a favor unless they owe you something. And even then, this is their business. So they're not likely to give you a favor just because. So how do you do that? How do you fix one of their problems? I'll give you a perfect example. If you're a producer and you are producing for my show, for example, and there's a breaking news story. There's the Casey Anthony trial that's going on. I need legal experts to come on and talk about that, because my reckless speculation can only take us so far. Jillian's can take us past 3 o'clock, but mine can only get us to 1:30. We need legal analysts. Who do we go to? We go to the guy who works for us. We go to Royal Oaks, the ABC News legal analyst. And if he's not available, who do we go to? The other guy that works for us, Leo Terrell, the fair-minded civil rights defense attorney. And if he's not available, who do we go to? My friend Robin Sachs, who I work with at Fox 11. And if she's not available, well, then we start looking for other people. That's where you come in. That's where people who don't have it in at the radio station come in. When I started out as a host, I was everyone's favorite 5th choice. And it worked. It did. When the Asiana plane crashes on the weekend in San Francisco, when I go on the air, I get the ABC News aviation analyst, John Nance. But guess what? It crashed on a weekend. And guess what? John Nance was on vacation. He was in South America somewhere, presumably on a nude beach. So what do we do if you're on the air on the weekend? Who do we know who's an aviation analyst? Who do we know who knows something about planes? And if you're on our radar at that point in time, and you're an expert on planes, you can solve one of our problems. And you can go on the air. Because you've got a frantic producer, and you've got a demanding host, and you've got a breaking news story, and you have a demand for someone when we don't have anyone on our stable. That's how you get on the air. You get on the air when there's some sort of crisis. It's not pretty, but it's the truth. And by the way, that's how I've gotten every job in this industry. I got hired as the executive producer of McIntyre in the Morning when there was a personnel issue with the sitting executive producer of the program, and there was a crisis, and I was the one in the building. I got my Saturday night show on KABC when the current Saturday host went nuts on the Dodger Talk guys, and they fired the Saturday night host, and they needed somebody new. I got my evening show when my good friend and mentor, Al Rantel, unfortunately came down with cancer. There was a crisis that pushed me up every step of the way. And there could be a crisis that puts you up and gets you on the air. It may not be something you want to talk about, a plane crash or something. It may not be something that you anticipate, but it could get your foot in the door. And that's when you need to be available. That's when you need to be on the radar of the producers. That's when you need to be next to your telephone. That's when you need to be able to go on the air and deliver. Because guess what? Getting on the air doesn't mean you'll be called back. Getting on the air means you have a chance. And if you're good, and you worked out for them in that pinch, odds are they'll call you back. If you're awful, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how good of a writer you are, doesn't matter how good your book is, you're not doing something for the host. And the fact of the matter is, in talk radio, it doesn't matter what element of the show you're talking about. It doesn't matter if it's the bump music, if it's the topic, if it's the call, if it's the guest. Doesn't matter. You are there to make me look good. And if you don't make me look good, you're not there. That's the way it works. My contract is renewed or not renewed based on how the ratings are. If the ratings are good, I get a raise and I come back. And if you're a guest that contributes to that, then I want you on as often as I can have you there. If you don't contribute to that, it's like you've got cancer and it's contagious and you'll never be on again. Is it fair? Maybe, maybe not, but that's the way that it works. So my advice to you would be instead to carpet bomb all the producers and all the hosts with pitches for your book and pitches for you as an expert or you as a brand. Don't do that. Don't do that, because if I see your name and I associate it with junk mail, I'm never going to open one of your emails up ever again. I'm just not. But if I know at some point in the future you did something or you sent something to me that makes me know that you're going to be useful or you could be useful at some point in the future, I'll put you in the back of my mind. Or I'll keep your book on my desk instead of putting it out in the hallway for the board ops to sell on Amazon for extra money, which is what we do. That's how to get on a radar. And it's not my show that works like that in a vacuum. All of the shows do. All of the shows on KABC, all the shows on our competitive stations, all the shows in other markets. Whenever I open up my email in the morning, take a guess at how many pitches I get for books and authors and experts. Just take a guess.
100, 1,000.
200, 500.
Not 500, but maybe about 100. 100 a day. And if I go on vacation like I did last week, I was in Mexico and I got sunburned because what light bulbs burned me. Because unfortunately my parents are the most pale people on the planet. I came back and I had hours and hours and hours of emails to go through. And most of them were junk. And I probably opened up 2% of them from the names that I knew, the names that I understood, the relationships that I had. Those were the people whose emails I responded to. If I don't know who you are and I have no relationship with you and I get regular junk mail from you, and junk mail means pitches that I don't think are useful, it's deleted immediately. I don't open it, I don't respond to it, I don't send it to my producers. That's how it works. So the key for you is to make sure that you indicate in some way, and don't say, I need to come on this week to sell my book, or I need to be featured on your show right now. If there's any way I can be useful to you in the future on this subject, in a pinch, on a weekend, at night, when there's breaking news, feel free to give me a call. Because if you do, I'll answer the phone, and I'll be ready to go, and I'll give you a good segment. I'll say that person's useful. That person, at some point, can be used on the air. If it looks like every other email I get, I don't open it up. I assume it's some sort of sales pitch for Viagra, or Nigerians need money, or it's Cambodian porn. And it gets deleted. But it can work that way. I'll give you an example. Actually, this wasn't even an email pitch. This was a pitch I met in person at a radio convention in Los Angeles. There's a woman in Las Vegas by the name of Dahlia Wax, who is a medical doctor. And she is, the best way to describe her is she is Roseanne Barr from the 1980s, who graduated from UCLA Medical School, and she's really smart, but she's funny, and she's crude, and she's got a personality that jumps through the radio. She's not like all these other doctors that just put me to sleep. And I met her at this radio convention, and I was walking up to the bar, as I do, I'm Scottish, and she's literally double fisting vodka sevens. She's got 2 vodka sevens, and she's pounding them as fast as she can pound them. And she's participating in all the panels. And I realized this woman it has a personality that just makes you want to be next to her. And then I find out that she's a medical doctor, and she actually knows what she's talking about, and she's funny. And my producer was with me, and he took her information, and he said, we should use her at some point in the future. And I thought, no way, she's going to drop the F-bomb on the air in about 2.4 seconds. We're going to risk the station's broadcast license. And something happened, and our medical doctor at the time, Dr. Bruce Hensel, was unavailable, and he said, let's use Dahlia. And I said, all right, because it was some medical topic, and I don't know anything about it. I know the head bone's attached to the neck bone, and that's it. So we had her on, and you know what? She killed. She was fantastic. And we've had her on over 100 times, and now Doug McIntyre has her on, and Brian Suits has her on, and I think Peter Tilden has her on. And I am such a believer in the way that this woman operates and the talent that she has. I evangelize for her every opportunity that I have. If someone asks me, who's a good medical person to go to, I say, go to Dahlia. When I'm in Good Day LA and they need a medical person, I say, hey, I know the perfect person. And Dahlia gets on TV, or if I'm at Fox News, I'm doing a hit on Bill O'Reilly, and somebody asks me, or I'm doing a hit on Red Eye or Sean Hannity, I'll tell them, book Dahlia. And she's got national bookings out of it, because I believe in it. But going back to the struggle for power and transactional relationships, this relationship works for me just as much, if not more, than it works for her. Because every time I put her on, she's money in the bank, and every time I recommend her, I know I'm doing somebody else a favor. I'm not doing her a favor, even though she may think that. She's doing me a favor. I'm more invested in her than she is in me. And it initially started out as this crazy woman getting drunk at a radio convention. But you know what? It worked for her. I'll give you another example of how it works in this industry when you sell books. One of my good friends is a New York Times best-selling author. Many of you, well, probably all of you know her. Probably half of you hate her guts. Probably half of you love her. And if you could get a picture with her, you would make it your profile picture of your Facebook page. Her name is Ann Coulter. And Ann Coulter has had, I think, 10 books on the New York Times bestseller list. And she has the big publishers. She had Simon & Schuster. She's had HarperCollins. She's had all of them. And they give you a press person. They give you someone who supposed to get you booked on the shows. You know what those press people do for Ann Coulter from the big publishers? They screw up all of her relationships. They don't do anything for her. You know who gets Ann Coulter booked on Fox? You know who gets Ann Coulter booked on The View? You know who gets Ann Coulter booked on talk radio? Ann Coulter. She works it. She does it all herself. She maintains those relationships, and she's up until 2 or 3 in the morning making sure that she's going to be out in places where she can sell the books. And if you look, radio is something, and television, radio and TV, but almost radio more than TV, is something that's very black and white. There are numbers involved in this. You can measure how many books are sold based on an appearance on a show. Sometimes I have my producers do this when I have an author on. They'll look at the Amazon.com rankings for a book before they're hit on the show. And then we'll look at the Amazon.com ranking after the show. They move books. They move books. And she knows that, and that's why she works it so hard. And she's in a little bit of a different situation than many of you, because she's a celebrity author now. And she can get on the phone or write a few emails and get booked on these shows. But you know what? It's still about power. And the producer of that show still has the ability to say yes or say no. And so she has to work them the same way that you do. I was telling Don earlier a story about the former senator from the state of New Jersey, Bill Bradley. You know who Bill Bradley is? He ran for Senate. He was an NBA star for the Knicks for many years. And he was at a function, one of these chicken dinner functions in New Jersey, as a sitting U.S. senator. And he was sitting up here where Don is, in the VIP section. And he told the guy who was passing out the butter, I want 2 things of butter. And the guy said, no, we're only supposed to give out 1. And Bill Bradley said, yeah, but I want 2. And he said, well, we're supposed to give out one. And he said, do you know who I am? And he said, no, who are you? And he said, I'm Bill Bradley. I'm the U.S. Senator from the state of New Jersey. And so the guy responds to him and says, you know who I am? And Bill Bradley goes, no. And he goes, I'm the guy that controls the butter. And the bottom line is, the producers of these shows are the doorman to the Millionaires Club. They have the power. So don't flood them with useless emails. Don't flood them with useless pitches. Let them know how you can be useful to them and their show, how you can get them better ratings, how you can get them re-signed at their radio station, how you can make the host look better. Because if you don't do those things, you don't get booked on the show. And if you're not familiar with the show, you don't know how to do those things. There are people that call me up and pitch me the dumbest things I've ever heard before in my entire life, because I would never talk about them on the show in a million years. Because they're not familiar with the show. Well, when you're not familiar with the show and you don't know that what you're selling isn't something that they're buying, you're wasting their time and yours. So every time I get a call from a life coach, are there any life coaches in here? Okay. Earmuffs. I would never have a life coach on my show in a million years. Sorry. That's just not something we do. We're a news talk station. We talk about what's on the front page of the paper. Okay? 60% of my emails are from life coaches. They just are. And plastic surgeons for whatever reason. Get a bunch of things from plastic surgeons. But they're not helping themselves by doing that. There are shows that will book them. I'm just not one of them. So why am I on their list? Why are they wasting my time? So they just get filed off in one of these categories, and if I could figure out how to use technology, I'd block them on my computer, but I can't. But it's something that doesn't work for either party. But they still do it because they're of the belief, well, I need to send out X number of emails today. No, you don't. Send them to the right people. Send them to the people that you can be useful for. Send it to Lifetime Network. Send it to Oprah's Network. Send it to people that will talk about that stuff. But don't send it to CNBC. Don't send it to ESPN. Don't send it to a political talk station, because they're not going to need life coaches. And it seems like many of the self-published authors, and frankly, many publicists, push their clients in that direction. And they're leading you down the wrong path. They're not going to get you bookings. So figure out which shows you can be useful for. Figure out where you can contribute to their ratings, to the content of their show, and pitch those people. That way, they'll be successful and you'll be successful. Because unless you're both successful, the relationship doesn't work. That's how it's got to work. And I think I'm done.
Thank you very much. Well, okay, we had a great trio. And now we'll go to the questions. Barbara Summers, are you near the microphone? This young lady with the hat. If any of you have a question, direct it at one of the three people here. And just give us your name. If you're plugging the book, get it out of your way fast. Is the mic working? Yeah, okay. Max, can you see if that microphone is working in the back?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Okay, okay. Any of you have a question? For about the next 10 or 15 minutes, we'll take questions. Okay, Rosalind. Okay, Barbara, you first. Rosalind. Okay, who do you want to talk to?
I'm sorry, I'm really bad at names and I greatly apologize. I don't mean to offend you. The name to the person to the right of you is? Mike, my name is Rosalind Kahn. I've recently published a book. It's called Random Acts of Kindness. That's the poster over there. It just came out about 9 weeks ago. And as a first-time publisher of a self-published book, in a very short period of time, I had 4 testimonials on my Amazon page. After 6 weeks, I was in the Agape bookstore. I'm online to be on 3 private bookstores, except my book is caught up in Ingram. My message is this. As a new published author, besides a speaker out there who is extremely passionate about changing people's lives, what would be the best advice that you could give to me on how I could get my book out there to more people.
Geez, I don't know. I don't know what your book is about other than I know the title of Random Acts of Kindness, but you need to find something very specific to pitch to people from that book that resonates with whoever you're pitching it to. I don't know what that would be.
My book is about random acts of kindness of college students, international students, and high school students going out and doing random acts of kindness. It's aligned with people in politics, and it shows people there are ways that each and every one of us in our lives can go out and do new and different things that can bring us happiness, joy, and take our lives to a greater fulfillment. That, in essence, is what the book is about.
I don't think I can. If you send me, we should talk and send me something and we'll talk on the phone, because I just don't have a quick answer for you. I just don't. I think it's a big topic that you need to compress down into something that's really specifically useful, helpful, interesting, and I don't know what that is right now with all these people staring at me. I have no idea. But let's talk after.
Thank you. Yes, and for John, a question.
The next victim, please, your name.
Yes, thank you. My name is George Hassan. I'm a producer of a talk show. And my question is, how can I find a co-host? Because occasionally I'm sitting there and I have to go into dialogue and it's just dying there. What's the best way to find a co-host?
To whom are you directing the question?
To John, please.
John Phillips.
My advice would be to have someone really good get fired from Good Day LA and have them be available.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What was that? Urban, what was, yeah.
Well, I'm stuck. Who do you've got to ask a question of one of the three.
I turned my face the other way and I didn't get the answer. John, my apologies, I didn't hear you.
John, you get a second chance.
Okay. My advice is to have someone really good get fired from Good Day LA and have them be available.
We got to move this. Barbara, do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the question is John Phillips. We also had it's a movie star. It's called The Lucky Southern Star, the Festival of the Lagoons, its 60th anniversary. Now, she's been on radio, Julie Adams. You ever had as a guest about almost 2 years ago. And also we had Ann Robinson, War of the Worlds. She was a guest of Tom Cruise. And yes, Tom Cruise is not gay. Also, we're going to say something else. But fortunately, I didn't hear that one. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, how do you market it, the book, in a certain way? Because she's going to see the President of the United States this year. He has a book. Also, as well, is that Ms. Scully, they're going to get something down at Dodger Stadium. I know your eyes are taken a certain way. But I also want to know that this book is sold very, very well. And she's done radio. Now, how much can you further better it on radio to sell it?
John?
Wait, who's the actress?
Julie Adams, the creature from the Black Lagoon. Oh boy. Remember that Jimmy Stewart show?
No.
Okay, then we're in another one. Okay, her husband was once the director, Ray Danton, who did Cagney and Lacey. Okay, you do know that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. A way for her to get bookings today, though? I mean, how long has it been since those movies came out?
Oh, that movie happened 60 years ago. It's for the anniversary. So it's
If your last hit was 60 years ago and you want to get booked on the radio today, my advice would be to kill your husband.
I know about killing husbands, but I'm going to go different further than killing husbands or whatever. How do you do it in a certain way?
With a knife?
That's great for comedians. We had Marty Ingles, we should have a couple of those. I'm asking you, how is it to sell it to the radio? Because you said so much emails, you said so much of this and that.
I mean, honestly, I would never book that.
Okay. Who would most likely you would go to book that?
Who was on the radio 60 years ago?
Internet radio.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, Tony.
Thank you.
One question to a customer,
Yes,
please.
we have a question here for Don
Robert
Barrett.
Summers, okay.
Hello. I wrote a book about my adventures with a couple of drug-addicted gals I met at a 7-Eleven in Albuquerque. They were transients. One of them was a boulevard prostitute, and they took me on a 6-week roller coaster of adventures. And I think the fact that I survived that would qualify me as an expert on addiction, or how to deal with people who are addicts and who are thieves and who, you know, find unconventional means to survive.
You have a question.
So I was just wondering if you guys knew of a good radio talk show to pursue, and if you know of a good manager, because I need a good manager.
John brought up a point that I think is lost on a lot of people. We pitch radio shows and producers having never heard the show before. And I think the key is to really know who your target audience is. And what comes to mind immediately with your subject matter is that there are just a ton of people who are dealing in the addiction world. You know, starting with Dr. Drew Pinsky. So you have a double-barreled thing there with television and also K-Rock with Mike Carruthers, or Catherwood. You have who's Jimmy Kimmel's partner? Adam Carolla. He has a podcast, #1 podcast in the country. They deal with those kinds of subjects all the time. The more lurid, the better. Tom Likas has an internet show. So you have to go down the dial. You have to do your reading. Find out who talks about these subjects, because there are people out there. I mean, there's something for everybody. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Barbara, do you have a question?
Yes, we do. We have a question for Mike, please, Erwin.
Hi, I'm John. First time here. Thanks to you. I guess Mike was basically the whole staff there. I just wrote my first book. I'm a comedian and actor, so I like to be funny with my interviews. And I wrote a book about a guy I met 22 years ago. Hurricane Andrew was coming, and I met him in the elevator, and he was an old Jewish man. And I said, "How you doing, sir?" And he goes, "Fine." And I said, "Do you care about the hurricane? Do you hear about Hurricane Andrew?" He goes, "Hurricane Schmerricane." He didn't care. I said, "Why don't you care about it, sir?" And he goes, "You know where it was many years ago?" I go, "No." And he goes, "Auschwitz." And I go, "Oh boy." He goes, "Let me show you something." So he shows me his Hitler tattoos. And then he goes, and they go, "Oh." And he looks at me and he goes, "What's little Wind?" What's little Wind? So the name of my book is What's Little Wind? And the reason I'm asking my question is that all these stories, it's not the whole book is not about this man, but it's his perspective on life. And I took the stories of my life and I put them into spiritual things and talk about the Torah and the Bible and all that kind of things and some motivational things. So I guess my question is, can I use that? Is that a good thing to put on the radio? Because it has so many different chapters to my life and the things of patriotism and honesty and how my parents met, and it relates to everybody.
I would refer back to what Don just said. I'm sure there are shows that would love that, just as there are shows that love recipes. I mean, you've got to find the shows, and you've got to do the research to find the shows that are interested in that kind of topic. There are plenty of them. But
it's a very broad spectrum, though. So is that good? Because everybody can relate to it, whether you're old, middle-aged, white, black. I mean, everybody can relate to my stories.
But remember what John said. What you are appealing to is you're appealing to the listener. Everybody can relate to that. Well, but that's not. If you want to be on the radio, you got to appeal to the host. You got to appeal to the producer. You've got to appeal to the show, a specific show that does specific things. I mean, this happens a lot where people say, "I have an idea for a show," and everybody will love it. Well, but you've got program directors, you've got hosts, you've got producers, and those are the people you've got to convince. It's not the audience. It's the people that produce the shows.
If you're a producer, why wouldn't they agree to something that's broad that everybody can relate to?
Well, that's a non-question. Why is it important? You've got to find people that do. It's like saying, well, why wouldn't a shoe store sell refrigerators? Everybody needs a refrigerator. And it's you've got to find the shows that sell the shoes. You've got to do the work. And
okay, that's good enough. All right, thanks.
Thank you. And Ed, a question here.
A pitch and a question. I write books about human behavior, The Male Thing Explained, Secrets of an Orgasm to Urban Baby Boomer, which has been helping a lot of people with guilt and shame and abuse issues. And my new book is Faith and Alliance Healing Journey Back to Innocence, Lessons on Forgiveness, which teaches about how to forgive self and others, why, when, and where. My question is to the entire panel, and it has to do with getting the attention of the radio host or the producer. And you mentioned about, most of the emails kind of end up in your trash bin. What would be a subject in an email that would get each of your attention that you would actually open it up? Thank you.
Thank you, John.
What kind of email could get me to?
What subject in an email would get you to open it, which would get you to open it up?
To get me to open the email?
In the first place, yeah. You said that, the email has to be compelling and this, that, and the other, in terms of within the subject, but what is going to get you to open it up rather than just sending it to your trash or spam?
We're offering Hillary Clinton for the hour.
Wow.
Yes.
That's not a subject I would do in my show.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying in general, it doesn't have to be about me, and maybe some of the other hosts would have an idea as well. You basically, you said you basically most of the emails you trash, but I mean,
you would not pitch that to a news talk show.
I wouldn't be pitching this. I'm not talking about pitching these subjects because again, I understand that isn't what you would. But I'm just saying in general.
I'm an expert on plane crashes. The next time a plane crashes, call me whenever it crashes.
That would be in the subject to get you to open up the okay.
I am an expert. I survived a plane crash.
Okay, and the others who may be opening up emails for other subjects?
Okay, we're going to wind up just with those 4 people. Only 3 more questions.
Yeah, we have one question coming up to you, Erwin, from a young lady here, and she is going to pose her question, and you then select one of the featured guests to address it. Thank you.
All right, this lady is from Nigeria, Caroline.
Yes, and I'm not trying to sell you something that is... Okay, my name is Nkoye Wampo, and I'm writing a book about South Sudan, The Lost Boys, but I'm a socio-political writer, so I got interested in wars as a whole because there have been many wars in South Sudan. So I wrote an article. One of them is the world Phillips while South Sudan drowns, and then another one is the world with hoax while South Sudan drowns. So my question, or not quite a question, but I'm also want to know if you will be interested, because I'm becoming a war expert, and since they've been talking about wars and American policy regarding Syria and now regarding Iraq, my interest is they seem to talk more about policies, about the mistakes of the presidents, more than the ordinary person, more than the refugees who are flooding the whole space, the whole world. Nobody's talking about them. They're more interested about the rulers, were they good, were they bad, but how about the ordinary person? The question is any of you interested in Sudan or the war? And is there a way I can come to your radio show and talk.
She's volunteering to be a guest.